It is killing the economy. And when you ask people what their greatest concerns are, the economy, jobs, the debt, the deficit, and oh yes, Obamacare. And look at the number of waivers that this president has granted just over the last year. Some 15 waivers that he and Secretary Sebelius have come up with. And if you really look at the ones that they've picked and choose to delay another year or two, and this latest thing to delay the implementation of the employer mandate for the small businesses that have anywhere from 50 to 100 employees. That's probably a lot of folks in this room. But think about the politics of that. Think about the 2014 election. Why did he do that? It's no surprise to me why he did it. It's political. But the law is not repealed. It's still on the books. It's still the law. You're still going to have to suffer and struggle with those mandates, and it's killing your businesses. I say repeal or go home, get rid of this bill, replace it. My colleagues have mentioned a number of bills that we Republicans have to replace that, either individual bills or omnibus bills. I'll offer one suggestion as my time is expiring. Why not say COBRA, which lasts 18 months? Why not let that last until a person turns 65 and is eligible for Medicare? If they've been in a group plan, why can't they keep that if they choose to do so? That's the solution.
Thank you, Dr. Gingrey, Congressman Gingrey. And now the third of our three doctors prescribing a new prescription, I hope, Dr. Paul Brown.
Dick, I am a family doctor, and I do have the prescription. Obamacare cannot be fixed. It must go in its entirety. And I've got the plan. It's a Patient Option Act. It's been endorsed by the Association of American Physicians and Surgeons, which is the conservative alternative to the liberal American Medical Association. And what it does is it puts you in charge of your health care decisions. In fact, of all the Republican plans out there, it's the only one that completely repeals Obamacare and takes a federal bureaucrat out of health care decisions for you. Now, all the Republican plans, as an example, just let me give you a couple of examples. All Republican plans have association plans. I'm a Rotarian. We can have a Rotary International plan. The other Republican plans have the Secretary of Health and Human Services controlling the Rotary International plan. Mine lets the Rotary Club International leadership control the plan. All the Republican plans have cross-state line purchases, but still the federal government dictates policy. Mine is the only plan that truly puts you in charge of all your health care decisions and is truly market-based. It does some very innovative things. For instance, in my bill, we give physicians like myself, I'm a primary care doctor, family doctor, I've given away hundreds of thousands of dollars of my care to indigent patients over my years of practice in medicine. Doctors don't get anything for doing that. We just do so. But what my plan does is it gives doctors a tax credit for seeing indigent patients. So it takes care of people with pre-existing conditions. It takes care of people who are poor. And also, if you decide to give money as a donation to your local hospital or to a free clinic where I worked in Athensville, Mercy Health Clinic, it gives you a tax credit for that contribution. And you think about what that does. It takes money out of the hands of the bureaucrats as well as the politicians in Washington and sends it back to where it should be utilized, and that's to take care of people in need. Obamacare is the greatest symptom of a government that is just totally out of control, and that big government is the disease. And that's what I've been fighting ever since I've been in Washington. It's been built by both parties. I want to get the power and the money out of the hands of the politicians and put it in your hands so you can run your business, run your family, run your lives without all this government intrusion. And that separates me from every other single candidate in this race. I I believe in limited government, and that's what I'll fight for as your U.S. Senator.
Thank you, Dr. Brown. Before we go to the next question, I just realized this must be a very important event because the Dean of Georgia's political reporters, Jim Galloway, the political insider, is here. Raise your hand, Jim. Jim is younger than I am. All right, the next question, Dr. Brown, let's start with you on this one. As a small business owner, I think all of us in this room, myself included, we deal with a lot of red tape and a lot of forms. I really just want to put out the news on my business. If elected, how would you help reduce the regulatory burden? And I'm curious, do I really have to post all that stuff they send me? Do I have to post that where my employees can see it? It's ridiculous. The walls are overrun with postings and none of my employees read it. So, I don't know. All right, there's your question.
Dick, you're right. It is ridiculous. And the answer is this document, the Constitution of the United States. All of those things, Dick, are just symptoms of a government that's just too big. It's too intrusive. It's too powerful. Both parties have built it. And it's just got to stop. And what I've been doing ever since I've been in Washington is trying to find bridges to send powers back to the states or to the people as it should be. That's the reason I wrote that part of my Patient Option Act that takes the money out of the hands of the politicians and the bureaucrats. We've got to stop this regulatory burden. The greatest regulatory burden on small business as well as large business is the EPA. The EPA is running up your cost of energy today. I want to get rid of the EPA altogether. We've got to be good stewards of our environment, but the state can do that without the federal government putting this heavy boot on the throats of our job creators in the economy. All those regulations that Mr. Williams was talking about, it's put out by the Department of Labor, the Department of Commerce. I want to close those too. Let's get rid of OSHA. Let's get rid of what? Most of the things that the federal government's doing today, and let's send those powers back to the states or the people. We're headed towards an economic meltdown in this country if we don't stop this out-of-control government. The spending too much, taxing too much, regulating too much, borrowing too much. I've never voted for a stimulus package. I've never voted for a bailout for anybody. I've never voted to raise taxes. I told you if 10% is good enough for the Lord, it's all to be good enough for Uncle Sam. But we've got to shrink the size and scope of government. And we have to stop spending money in Washington that we don't have. I've never voted to raise the deficit. In fact, we just had a vote just last week. Most Republicans voted against it. But we've had debt ceiling vote after debt ceiling vote since I've been in Congress, and I've never voted to raise the debt on your children and grandchildren. It has to stop. And that separates me from every candidate in this race. I see the disease. The disease has been government, and it's just totally out of control. Both parties have built it. I want to take the power and the money out of the hands of those politicians in Washington, whether they're conservative Republicans or liberal Democrats, and put that power back in your hands and put the money back in your pockets so you can run your business and your family without all this government intrusion, so you don't have to post all those things, Dick, on your wall.
I actually have stopped my lack of defiance.
Dick, I happen to sit on the Energy and Commerce Committee, and we have on that committee jurisdiction over the Environmental Protection Agency. And believe me, they are probably the most onerous agency in regard to those rules and regulations, Dick, that you're talking about that are burdening, killing small businesses, whether it's Dunwoody Pryor or Sundial Plumbing or Marietta OBGYN affiliates. It has got to stop. Now my colleague just talked about eliminating all these departments of federal government, including the EPA, and maybe ultimately that would be a good thing. But in the meantime, with a divided government, what can we do? What should we do? And I'll tell you a number of things that we have passed through the committee that I'm on, Energy and Commerce, and also passed through the Republican-controlled House of Representatives. We passed it in 2012, we passed it in 2013. It's a bill called the RAINS Act. Now the RAINS is an acronym, and I can't remember the exact what it stands for, except I do know what the bill says. And the bill says that any rule or regulation enacted by an agency of the federal government, including the Environmental Protection Agency, when it's put in the Federal Register, it's a final rule, okay, it's a done deal, it will not go into effect unless the Congress of the United States votes on a resolution of approval in both the House and the Senate if that rule or regulation is going to cost more than $100 million in any 1 year. Now, I know that sounds like a lot of money, but believe me, these rules and regulations that Dick is asking about are killing us. They're absolutely killing our economy. Now, there's another provision that is law called the Congressional Review Act, which allows Congress, if a rule or regulation is passed, to pass a resolution of disapproval. Now, that law has been on the books since the late 90s, and the only time it's ever been used was when Clinton was going out of office. He had this ergonomics rule, which was an absolute killer, and we were able in the Congress to rescind that by passage of the Congressional Review Act. So we need to continue to do that. We need to fight hard. We need to understand. We need to utilize the powers that we have, and of course we need to have a Republican Senate, and we need to have a Republican president in 2016 that understands the significance of this and how it's killing jobs in this country.
Go ahead, Karen.
Thank you. The cost of regulations in this country, they cost businesses approximately $1.8 trillion a year. I mean, that is staggering, and I think there needs to be a much greater sense of urgency on the part of Congress in addressing the owner's regulatory climate. And it's not just the regulations themselves, it's the punitive nature of the regulators as well, especially in the finance side and also in EPA. So some of the things that I think we need to do, certainly the RAINS Act, but again, I get back to results matter. This has been a piece of legislation that has been sitting there for I don't know how long, and you know, it's great to co-sponsor things, but folks, we need to have actual results and move things forward and actually deliver real results. I've also proposed that we conduct an across-the-board audit, agency by agency, of the entire regulatory climate so that we can really start to understand the duplication that we have across agencies at the federal level, but also from the federal level down to the state level. And that's a monumental effort, and it will take diligence in doing it, but it needs to be undertaken if we're really going to get our hands around this incredible out-of-control regulatory climate that we have. And then the last piece, so that we don't have regulations sit on the books for 10, 20, 30 years without ever looking at them again, let's have a 10-year sunset rule on every major regulation and rule that comes through to actually force into the institution of Congress, into the process, an actual review that gives not only an opportunity to look at the impact from the regulation side onto the businesses, but gives you the opportunity to input back what the impact is on your businesses from day in and day out. So those are some of the things that we think we need to do, but we're only going to get there if we elect an individual who is going to be focused on results and has the resolve and the ability to actually get things done in the tough environment that is Washington, D.C.
Thank you, Ms. Campbell.
Thank you.
Congressman Jack Gibson.
I think we have an environment of regulatory chaos right now. It has manifested itself in a number of ways. Number one, absolute uncertainty. What are the regulations as we implement Obamacare, as America implements Obamacare? Who's going to go under it? Who's going to be exempt from it? 1,231 mandates. Some of them, we as business people would support, but it's still regulatory uncertainty. Number two, regulatory duplication. Sometimes the state government or the local government's already doing what the federal government has decided to do. Number three, there's an I gotcha attitude. As if you as business people really wanted to hurt your employees and poison your clients. It is such an antagonistic attitude. It's not one of partnership. Number 4, winners and losers. Imagine the 6th floor of the women's shoe store or shoe section of Macy's department store being allowed to have a micro union and the rest of the employees don't have one. What does that do? That's just picking winners and losers, and that's what our regulatory environment allows. And then number 5, and finally, an overreach. I talked to a bank the other day in a small town. This town only has 2 banks. They're about to be audited. 11 auditors will be descending upon them. How would a community bank do business while they have 11 people auditing them? It's a huge overreach. So whether it's Dodd-Frank or Obamacare or EPA mandates, we have to push back on it. You know, the RAINS Act has passed the House. I supported it. It's sitting in the Senate. That's why I want to go to the Senate, because that's where the battleground is. That's why the American dream is in peril. Because Harry Reid and the Democrat majority are stopping reform legislation. That's where the battleground is right now. On any new regulation, we need to identify the problem, assess all types of solutions, and then if it appears that the federal government's got to be involved, then we should have a cost-benefit analysis. And then obviously it should be sunset, because businesses change, regulatory environments should change with them in an appropriate way. Thank you.
David Perdue?
Thank you, Dick. Let me put this in perspective. I had my feet in big businesses and small businesses all my career, 40 years plus. This is what I see as what's going on right now, and I think you see it the same way. I think we have an ideological battle going on that this administration is trying to manage this economy and using the regulatory arm to do that, as well as the presidential executive order. They couldn't get cap and trade passed a few years ago, so they turned around and told the EPA to kill coal. They did within a year. Let me give you an example. I'm on the board of the line eaters in Wisconsin. They service 5 states. It's a utility company, very much like the Southern Company. It took us 14 years to get EPA approved, 14 behind 2 500-megawatt coal plants. We got approval from the EPA finally 2 years ago. Last year they came in with sending out approvals. Now we've already spent probably $160+ million just getting ready to do this, between legal fees and everything else, engineering and so forth. And now we have to start all over again. Well, the only other place to go right now, ladies and gentlemen, is natural gas. So we meet with the Sierra Club and the EPA late last year, and now they're telling us that's a bad decision because they're going to go after natural gas the same way they're going to after coal. Now here's my question to all of us. I hear the RAINS Act, I hear everything else. Where's Congress been, not just in the last couple of years, the last 20 years? This battle about managing this economy should not be happening. We debated that in the 70s, it didn't work. We turned around in the 80s, it got corrected. We enjoyed that boom of economic growth all through the 90s until the 2002 recession. In my mind, what you've got to have is people in Congress who understand the ramifications of what's happening because they have the oversight responsibility. When you realize that fewer than 10 people, about 10 people in the United States Senate have any business experience. Listen to me, fewer than 10. And we finally really run a business. 36 United States senators have been elected office over there for over 30 years. Tell me why we have this conversation today about regulatory overreaching and an administration trying to manage our economy. You realize we have $6 trillion sitting on the sidelines right now, not participating in capital expenditures in this country. $6 trillion. $2.5 trillion are in foreign banks. These are U.S. corporate profits. They're not being repatriated. I first saw this when I was running Reebok. A large percentage of our profits were outside the United States. We couldn't get Congress to listen to us that was killing investment in this country. And 10 years ago, the majority of patents around the world were created right here in the United States. Today, the majority of patents are created in Asia. And that's one large reason why. We have $2 trillion on our bank balance sheets right now. And that's because of Dodd-Frank and because of the uncertainty that this administration has perpetrated on American business. You know it and I know it. Finally, there are $2 trillion on balance sheets of corporate America. It's not being reinvested the way it should be because of the uncertainty coming out of Washington. I would argue that the only product that Washington is capable of producing right now is uncertainty. Thank you.
Indulge me, I'm going to say this now, I just enjoy saying it, now that I've done it. Dr. Bronco, Roger Lavon. It's odd for the NFIB, you would think taxes would always be the first question. It shows you the enormity of the Obamacare issue for all of us, the taxes pushed down here. Dr. Rand, I'm going to stay with you.